Day one of free agency frenzy for the Vikings wasn't just about the players lost, as the team did make some solid signings, as well as hosted a meeting for the now most sought after free agent at the defensive tackle position, with a clear path now paved towards signing him. We're going to be breaking down all of that in this episode of Vikings Digest, but first make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you don't miss any and all Vikings updates, as free agency frenzy is now in full swing. And with that, let's hop into the first topic of the day, which is free agency day one signings. So if you saw our last video, you would see that the Vikings did sign former Eagles cornerback Isaiah Rodgers to a 2-year, $15 million contract with the Minnesota Vikings. And going into it a bit further, we were talking more about the implications of that with Cam Bynum leaving, but how that was kind of indicating it. But the deal includes $8 million fully guaranteed, and the deal was negotiated by Brian Gavin and Ed Wasilewski of EMG Sports. And the other signing that we got a little bit ahead of ourselves there with was that they agreed to terms with punter Ryan Wright, who was set to become a restricted free agent, as Tom Pelissero said last night. I wouldn't assume this preludes the team from adding competition, thus ends my punter coverage for the moment. So the Vikings do need some reinforcements at punter. It's not that they needed the reinforcements, but Ryan Wright, he's been there for a few seasons. We want to just make sure that we can keep as many pieces together as we can, especially if they're not coming at a very big cost, especially when we look at the signings so far the Vikings have made. Hasn't been a super busy offseason as far as re-signing guys or going out and signing guys as well. We just saw that Sam Darnold and Cam Bynum, they're now gone, Seattle and Indianapolis respectively. But Aaron Jones, you saw that was the big signing yesterday that they did ahead of this free agency opening, with them giving Aaron Jones a 2-year extension at $20 million, and as well as Theo Jackson a day prior as well, getting a 2-year, $12.6 million deal. And then today, Isaiah Rodgers and Ryan Wright as well being brought in. Ryan Wright just on a 1-year, $1.75 million deal. And then, of course, Isaiah Rodgers, like I said, 2 years, $11 million. So Ryan Wright, they're going to keep him around for a relatively cheap price tag. This is just some extra insurance to make sure that we can have something bolstered down in special teams. I know special teams isn't something that gets a lot of focus on this channel or just in the NFL in general, but it is a major important component of the game. We've seen in Minnesota Vikings games in general, a lot of points be swayed from punt returns, from getting turnovers on blocked punts, and so on and so forth, where it can change the momentum of a game, especially if you have a punter who can pin a team deep or can just get a good backspin and just bump it out, so it's not going into the end zone for a touchback or going out of bounds errantly and things like that, where they're getting great field position. We've done a pretty good job at making sure that we have solid punters for the past almost decade now, I want to say. We haven't had a bad punter in a long time. I know it's weird saying it, but it does go a long way for Minnesota. When looking at a lot of the close games that we've been in, when you look at close games that are one possession games, a lot of times the factor of those games are time of possession, turnovers, and field position. Those are where the three games are won, or those are three elements where the game is won in those super close games. So how do you dictate field position? It all comes down to special teams. Time of possession, that's an offensive thing. Turnovers, that's a defensive thing. So all three of those elements are what makes up the close games that are one score, and that Minnesota Vikings fans have grown way too accustomed of experiencing just in the past 3 seasons alone since KOC has been here, not to mention the long history of heart attack games that we've had before that. So with this, you want to make sure you have a really solid punter, one that isn't going to be going anywhere for at least another year. And as well, you can bring in another guy like a free agent or go draft a punter or whatnot, someone you can bring in relatively cheap and have a bit of a punting competition, get a bit of a chip on either of the guy's shoulder, and have a bit more fun with the season and have something for them to play for so that they stay motivated and stay going and stay competitive throughout the entirety of the season. As far as Isaiah Rodgers is concerned, I really like the signing. He just won a Super Bowl with Philly. This is a really good fill-in spot because unfortunately we did lose Cam Bynum. Hopefully this means that we are going to be signing Byron Murphy, so we aren't losing both of them, let alone 3 of them if Harrison Smith chooses to retire. So Isaiah Rodgers, you bring him in. They extended Theo Jackson where he can be used as a safety or a corner. So the Vikings were kind of planning for contingency plans in both aspects. Cam Bynum, that was one we have a contingency plan for. Now it's if we have one for Byron Murphy and or Harrison Smith. It remains to be seen. We'll see what happens on Wednesday when the full free agency market does open up to the restricted free agents. All the unrestricted ones went today. There was a lot of big names, a lot of big defensive names that went off the board. But what do you guys think of the first day one signings and even the 2 signings before this with Ryan Wright, Isaiah Rodgers, Aaron Jones, and Theo Jackson. What do you think of the free agency market so far and this free agent window that the Vikings have had so far? Let us know down in the comments, but that's going to take us into our second topic of the day, which is Jonathan Allen to visit Minnesota. So like I said just a few seconds ago, a lot of defensive guys went today. A lot of big name defensive guys. And the Minnesota Vikings are welcoming former Washington Commanders defensive lineman Jonathan Allen for a visit on Monday per Adam Schefter, who added that the two-time Pro Bowler has a good amount of interest. And it's not just interest from other teams, but interest in coming to Minnesota. The Commanders released Allen on Friday. After 8 seasons, in 109 games, Allen amassed 401 tackles, 118 quarterback hits, 42 sacks. He was also the team's Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee in 2020 and 2021. Jonathan Allen, this is one that when the Commanders released him, I was really all for it. I think this was something where you go out and get him at no matter what the cost. Even though that cost, it was a money move for the Commanders because he's in the final season of a 4-year, $72 million contract extension. He was initially granted a trade request, but when it didn't materialize, the Commanders released him and saved $16.5 million in cap space. So if the Vikings bring him on, that is a lot of money to take on, and it will warrant a lot of money at an extension. We're going to get into that in a second. But as far as with Jonathan Allen in general, I think from the start, he was someone that I thought would be perfect in Minnesota, even when we were still in the running for Milton Williams. And then for a brief window of time, Grady Jarrett was available. But now Milton Williams, he's gone. Grady Jarrett, he's gone. A lot of other guys have been signed. So now, who's the best defensive tackle option available? Jonathan Allen. And where was Jonathan Allen visiting today? In Minnesota. So it kind of all worked out naturally where as he was coming to Minnesota and as the day progressed on, maybe he's still in Minnesota at the time of recording this. Who knows? But as this was all happening, some of the other best guys were being taken off the board here and there and here and there. Meanwhile, Minnesota, they still have 2 days to wait and see what they want to do with Jonathan Allen. So they now have the opportunity where they had him in the building. They've seen all these other guys go now. They've already had a meeting with him after seeing those guys go. So now they're in a position where, as far as my money is concerned, Jonathan Allen, he is the absolute best defensive tackle available on the market right now. Especially, even though he is coming off of an injury, he still is very elite and has 2 Pro Bowls. He's a pillar of his community, so he's going to make an impact off the field as much as he is on the field and in the locker room. So that's even more incentive as to why you can bring him in. And with his visit to Minnesota, Jeremy Fowler, per Adam Schefter and Jeremy Fowler, Kevin Seifert was saying that it makes sense from a need standpoint. The Vikings haven't had a classic interior disruptor in the 2 seasons Brian Flores has been their defensive coordinator, forcing some creative personnel usage. Allen and Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell also overlapped in Washington when O'Connell was an assistant coach there. So there's a little bit of familiarity there, I know, on different sides of the ball. However, Brian Flores needs a solid pass rusher, a definitive pass rusher. And I think he is somebody that can fill in that void very nicely because as great as Harrison Phillips is, and as good as Jonathan Bullard is, as solid as Jerry Tillery is, we need somebody to go with Harrison Phillips. Jonathan Bullard and Jerry Tillery are also becoming free agents this week. So Allen would help shore up the defensive line as they move into the rest of the offseason. Signing him would have no impact on compensatory picks because he was released. Allen was also limited to 8 regular games last season due to a pectoral injury, but was able to return in the playoffs, had 19 tackles, 3 sacks in the regular season, and 6 in the postseason. So he will make an impact on this Vikings team, and I think he would be great on this Vikings team. If you do let Bullard walk, you let Tillery walk, you re-sign Pat Jones, you keep him around, you have Dallas Turner, you have Jonathan Grenard as well, who we're going to get into in a second here, you have Andrew Van Ginkel, so you have guys on the edge. Now you have that interior shored up where you have Harrison Phillips and Jonathan Allen right next to each other. That would be a duo that I think a lot of teams and a lot of run defenses might be starting to fear because of the impact that both these guys can have. Harrison Phillips hasn't been one of those marquee guys necessarily as far as defensive pass rushers are concerned or interior defensive linemen. However, when he shines in those moments, he's shining. He's an underrated star amongst defensive tackles. So if he's paired with a guy like Jonathan Allen, that's just going to amplify it even more because coverage is going to be covered on Allen. So he's going to get a lot of airtime. People are going to be talking about him, and he's going to be right next to him as well. So it's not that he's going to be riding his coattails, but these guys are going to be a duo that would be very, very hard to deal with for offensive lines and running backs and quarterbacks even if they are on the same team together. And what do you guys think on this as well? Because we know what Jonathan Grenard thinks of this, posting the eye emojis on that tweet from Darren Wolfson saying about Jonathan Allen coming to visit. But what do you guys think down in the comments on Jonathan Allen? Would you guys love to see him in Minnesota? Even though he is going to warrant a big price tag, would you be willing to pay it? And what do you think that this means as far as the other free agents for Minnesota if you bring him in? Because you bring him in, maybe you don't get Byron Murphy now. Now you have to settle for, not settle, but you have to roll with Theo Jackson and as well as Isaiah Rodgers for the season and potentially lose Harrison Smith unless you can convince him to come back for one more year. There's a lot of things here and a lot of things that are going to be going down for the Vikings in the next few days. So let us know down in the comments how you guys are feeling about it, and can't wait to bring you guys even more updates as the week progresses and even into Wednesday as the full free agency market will be open for everybody. So for that, all I gotta say is leave a like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell icon so you don't miss the new episodes. But with that, I've been your host Griffin. Take care.